public, and then of course like Wall Street doesn't care either way, who in like an actual mass body of voters would that make any difference with?
Well, I don't know that anybody's proposals or any of the rhetoric will make a big difference with anybody. But I'm just saying that the question is that can Elizabeth Warren go further under the guise of capitalist reform than Bernie Sanders can go because he is labeled as a socialist?
I guess we'll see.
Well, okay. That we could have wrapped this up 2.5 hours ago.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't see that.
Like she is more acceptable to the mainstream of the Democratic Party, and I think that is something that will help her in the primary, if not in the general.
Okay, and so if that's the case, is there a substantive difference? Substantive, not rhetorical, not pedigree. Just I want to isolate it. This is what I'm trying to get at. A substantive difference in terms of their proposals at this point. And to the extent that there is, are hers, and I would say, putting aside foreign policy, because I think that they clearly...
Can you, though?
But, I mean for the course of the conversation, we can.
I want to answer this in two ways. First, neither person has announced that they're running for president.
Correct.
Right now. There's no...
Warren has announced that she's going to announce on the 9th.
Right.
She'll do it. Certainly.
But there's no, kind of two-column comparison that we can make right now and then, take a microscope and say, oh, well, this one's actually more left than that other one. What we do know about the two candidates is that Bernie Sanders has never been a Democrat in his life. He is, despite currently being in the Democratic Senate leadership, he is a socialist, proclaims a socialist, and ostensibly this means he wants to be a part of a burgeoning socialist movement in the country that can operate as a political force. Liz Warren, of course, says she's a capitalist, but I believe also she's very serious about reform and government intervention there, and perhaps even challenging the power of capital. No greater authority than Jonathan Chait actually pointed this out and was 100% correct when he said that socialists view the Democratic Party not as partners or something that they want to build, but as a marriage of convenience.
Right.
And with liberals and with, sadly, quite a lot of conservatives in that party. I believe that one priority right now, and that socialists have the best opportunity to do this, is to take over the Democratic Party and to clean house. And that means getting rid of that right flank and getting rid of the influence of capital within the party. And that goes back to my earlier point about challenging the power of health insurance companies and not having any Democrats take money from health insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies and defense contractors and Wall Street and so on and so forth.
Maybe part of it then is how you're measuring the power of the bully pulpit. Like maybe part of my bias is that, like part of how I don't see the question working for me is I just think that where it does matter rhetorically is that his baseline of that kind of fundamental challenge already puts the goalposts so far in a different left direction that's a parameter resetter in and of itself, and we'll see whether or not it works. But I don't,
Yeah, and I also object to divorcing it from foreign policy because really you can't. If you're going to have like a regulated capitalism and welfare state in one country, someone has to pay for that, right? And it's going to be paid for by imperial plunder. Like a socialist vision is a vision that has to extend to the whole world. And we've seen Bernie taking some very positive steps in the right direction to form that like progressive international with Yanis Varoufakis.
And Warren actually does have, she put out a decent liberal foreign policy manifesto, but it's very interesting because it parallels like essentially we should get back to almost like JFK stuff in the early 60s, which is like, don't be such a dick and help people develop and have some fair trade agreements. But when you don't talk about global oligarchy, when you don't talk about Lula, when you don't talk about restoring the Iran deal, you're leaving so much on the table.
And this certainly matters when we're talking about something like a Green New Deal, which thankfully we are talking about now. Mike Bloomberg says he's going to announce his Green New Deal plan. AOC is going to announce her Green New Deal plan. But
I'm going to pass the money on everyone.
But the thing is, I don't... I obviously don't like Bloomberg, and if he were the Democratic nominee, I would probably be opposed to him, I'd have to say. That being said, I'm very curious what's in his Green New Deal, because just from reading some of his past statements, the outline of it sounds like something that, a lot of people could get behind.
Environmentally, I have a feeling he'll be very strong.
He'll be good.
We have to transition away from a carbon-based economy, and, that has to be matched with replacing those jobs that are lost and economic investment in places like West Virginia. Okay, the outline of that sounds good, even if we were going to avoid the question of how do you pay for it, without any sort of wealth transfers, which Bloomberg is opposed to. The thing is, we're just talking about a Green New Deal in domestically as a way to eliminate our emissions, which is possible. It's very feasible. We have the capital, we have the labor, we have know-how, and we have the material inputs to do that. If we were the only country that does that, that does absolutely nothing.
Right.
Whatsoever.
So Giannis is campaigning on a Green New Deal across Europe right now, and he's coordinating with Bernie, so that also adds to the answer. And I would just say,
here's my Green New Deal. I'm going to buy China. I'm
making an initial public offer to China to buy all of them.
China,
and that's a good example. Europe's been reducing emissions for the past 2 decades. Several European countries are emissions neutral, and that has done nothing.
That's exactly right. And also, not only that, I mean, I think as far as Bloomberg's green policies, environmental policies go, and again, I don't mean this all critically at all, but just look at what Jerry Brown's done in California. Actually, on the transition and tech side, he's done some really good things. But if you have a concept, but on the drill and supply side, he hasn't, and I doubt Bloomberg would either. And if you also conceive of the environment as being connected to people's needs and things like environmental justice and other things that would be part of an AOC vision, Jerry Brown's not been particularly good. So, I mean, look, if the choice is Trump, or Jerry Brown or Bloomberg, you pick Jerry Brown or Bloomberg, but we're trying to put forth something different here.
And I would say that my starting position in terms of Green New Deal or any sort of policy, which again is this protean concept right now, would be the seizure of every energy company in the country.
Right.
That has to be it. And you would need to use their capital that they've accumulated destroying the planet for the past century in order to repair the planet.
And if Warren comes out tomorrow and says,
nationalization, I just think seizure just seems a little bit abrupt. I think nationalization just sounds a lot more.
And if
I love to see it. When the right wing got very scared, or I guess they're still scared of it right now, that, Trump is going to sign this executive order and he's going to do that, which is going to make a unilateral capital outlay, and we're going to seize land at the border. What's going to prevent a socialist Democrat president from signing executive order day one saying, well, it's an actual climate emergency, as we all know at this point. We're going to seize the assets.
We're going to start with the refineries, and then
every
we'll just work
single
our way back.
energy company, and we're going to redirect those resources. And I think that has to happen. That would be great.
The most fun candidate would be someone like Tony Blair or Bill Clinton or Kamala Harris explaining why the real third-way position is seizing all oil companies' assets. That's what I would do if I ran for office. I would explain that it's a new form of a public-private partnership while I'm lining people up against the wall.
Back to the question of party, it's really not totally clear to me. I am more skeptical than some of my more like orthodox Trotskyist comrades, DSA, on the question of the party, right? Because I think, these are folks who think we need a socialist party. We need a socialist party that is also a labor party, that is not this bizarre cross-class alliance that we have right now in the Democratic Party of workers and bosses, labor and capital. But like every time we've seen a socialist party succeed at taking power, they have ultimately failed. Like, look at what happened with Syriza in Greece. Like, everything is just so overdetermined by the wider political economic climate. That said, I would still prefer.
Syriza uniquely did not have the ability in their position to do much more.
Yeah,
than they
exactly.
did. I mean, but Jeremy Corbyn has more room to move. Bernie Sanders would have more room to move.
Well, we'll see, but it hasn't worked yet. But to be fair, nothing has worked yet, so I can't totally write it off. But that said, all of that said, I would still rather have a socialist party in the U.S. than the Democratic Party that we have now.
Here's a good counterpoint to that. A big reason why these left electoral movements have failed is precisely because they, even getting elected on a national level in a place like Greece or Venezuela, doesn't give you the actual levers of power that you need to make fundamental changes to society. And an interesting news story for the past week is I believe the British Royal Bank, which has control over Venezuela's gold reserves, is being urged to assign that over, the country's wealth, to this insurrectionary who's calling himself president.
They are.
And they are doing that.
Do that, yeah.
If you're the president of the United States and you're picking the chairman of the Federal Reserve, you're picking the head of the World Bank and the head of the IMF, I think you have a bit more power at that point.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah, I mean, the
especially with an
logistically
emergency
in the United
law.
States, armed revolution is
idea
more
is
likely than
that
an
is the
actual
counterpoint to what I just said, I
Right.
guess,
Yeah.
which is that, a lot of the time it's U.S. intervention that is the primary
Right.
factor in killing these movements. But, we'll see.
All right, I don't want to get too much into the weeds with this this next clip, but here is Dave Rubin.
Okay.
Nice little palate cleanser.
Exactly. He is interviewing Maxime Bernier, who is a Quebecian.
Gary Johnson.
That's French for Max Boot.
That's right. Yeah, is
He's Quebecois Gary Johnson.
Yeah, okay. So, and who, I don't know. I watched some videos of him. He's if the Proud Boys are up in Canada, he's spoken to them. He's that type of guy, right?
Oh, I see.
I'm speaking.
You mean like he's not funny?
Not yeah, but I'm not speaking literally. But he's been dancing around stuff like this, and so here he is on Dave Rubin's show. And Dave Rubin, it's been tough for him lately. He's dabbling. He's becoming anti-abortion curious, and so he's going through a transformation right now because he's starting to realize maybe it's not even worth it for me to pretend anymore.
We have our sovereignty as a country, and we must be able to select our immigrants. And so that's coming from the UN. So yes, you're right. I don't like the UN. I think that they're not so efficient. And I'm clear about that.
Yeah, do you guys have a strain, we're seeing in Europe now where there's nationalist parties, that there does seem to be a strain of sort of ethno-nationalism or something that has a different racial connotation to it. Do you guys have a strain of that in Canada? Because it seems to me that I think what's happening, and we're starting to see it here, is that if the good liberals and the good libertarians and the people who just want to live and let live, if they don't start making some advances against this radical leftism that's moving, there's going to be a lot of people that break in a bad way.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, I wouldn't be able to blame them. Yeah. And I say that as someone that has no racism in my heart.
Yeah.
But they would be left with no alternative as they watch their country crumble. Do you have any of that in Canada?
No, we don't, and it's a good news. But at the end, that's why we must have this discussion.
Yeah.
And I don't fear to have this discussion.
Now, for those of you who are not watching, you're just listening. Sam Harris is naked, and they're licking his body. He's lying on the coffee table, and they're licking his body.
I just want to say I've always liked the Rubin Report set because it's like a poly guy's living room. A single basketball in a glass cubby.
Yeah,
you picture him, and he's about to pull out a Go set and care for a game of the ancient Oriental.
But I mean, this is so. I don't even know. Dave Rubin here is basically saying that the SJWs are forcing us to have to be ethno-nationalist in this country, I guess. Yep. And if we don't have the conversation, of course, it'll get worse. Also,
in a weird way, he can't blame them if they do that.
Yeah, he can't. I mean, he doesn't have any racism in his heart, but he can't blame them because they have no choice but to become white ethno-nationalists. There's no other choice.
This is like the soft bigotry of low expectations that is now starting to I can think of personally a bunch of sort of
different choices.
I wouldn't say
you
they're
make.
sorry, what'd you say?
Different choices you might make.
Yeah, I was going to say. I was like, I could literally, sort of centrist, middle-aged, crotchety white guys who are annoyed by dumb SJW, whatever, and they've managed. They're like
You just talked
they have
about
not
sports.
embraced white nationalism. I think as the path of least resistance to their minor irritations about internet controversies that don't matter or whatever it is that they like. No.